Hello and welcome to the In Publishing podcast. My name is James Evelegh and I'm the editor of In Publishing. Our guest this time is Daniel Pearce, CEO of TTG Media, a company that was named PPA Independent Publishing Company of the Year in 2019. TTG operates in the travel sector, which has been particularly badly hit by the pandemic. Daniel tells us about his resolve to weather the storm.
This crisis is the defining moment for our business and for the way that we do business. And that as a result of that, we will emerge from this crisis stronger.
About how being an independent publisher has helped them get through this difficult period.
You know, I'm an absolutely passionate believer in the power that being an independent publisher gives you and the freedom of that. There's quite a few decisions that I've made and that my senior team have made over the past year that would have been difficult decisions going through a corporate business like the one I used to work for many years ago.
And why publishers should not be too timid when they decide to put up a paywall.
If you're going to do this, and you've got to believe in your content and your package and believe that it is the best in the business, and don't be too timid in where you place that paywall. Don't give away too much free content before you get to that paywall. Otherwise, kind of what's the point?
Amongst many other things in a wide-ranging interview. But first, a quick word about our valued sponsors. We would like to thank our podcast sponsor, Advantage CS, a leading global provider of subscription and membership management software. Capabilities include marketing, sales, payments, and customer relationship software for publishers, membership associations, and information providers. For more information, go to advantagecs.com. Daniel Pearce is CEO of TTG Media, a B2B publisher specialising in the travel sector. TTG was previously published by UBM, but Daniel led a management buyout back in 2013. As an independent publisher, he has since said, you have the flexibility you need to crack on and do stuff. This freedom of movement has presumably never been so welcome as in the past 12 months. Daniel, welcome to the In Publishing podcast.
Thank you, James. It's great to be here.
Now, it was obvious fairly early on that the travel sector would be one of those sectors which would be particularly badly hit by the pandemic. Can you give us an insight into what the atmosphere was like in your offices back in February, March of last year?
Yeah, well, I guess we got an early indication of what was happening in early February, looking back. And that was a time when some of our advertisers from the Far East, so tourist boards, resort operators, and some of their partners in that part of the world started pulling activity. And at that time, you know, it slowly started dawning on us that, you know, what was, for so many of us, you know, just a big news story, but one on the other side of the world. It slowly started dawning on us that this was going to impact us over here and the way that we do business. So quite early on in that period, you know, we set out a strategy there to do the very best that we could for the industry and to evolve our own business along the way, to campaign for our market. And really just to do the very best job that we could just to support the travel industry. And, you know, that's a strategy that then played itself out over the subsequent months and resulted in, you know, a lot of change for the business and in some respects, positive change.
And what was the mood like? I mean, did people freak out? Were they running around like headless chickens, or was everyone very composed?
Looking back, I think everyone was composed, and I wouldn't say at all that TTG is akin to the Titanic, but it was for a little time, and I'm sure, like it was in most businesses, there was that sense of just rearranging deck chairs, you know, while the storm came in. You know, looking back, we were remarkably calm, I think, and I remember going through the processes. It was March by then of working out how we were going to cooperate at home. And, you know, which video platform we were going to use. You know, we started with Google Hangouts and quickly moved to Zoom. But then, yes, while we were in the office, I remember, you know, when those dreadful daily press conferences started coming in with the Prime Minister, that phase when everyone was gathered around the TV in the office at 5 o'clock and listening to the latest developments. And for us at that time, we did have quite a significant event that we had planned to take place in Birmingham in late March. And I remember that the final announcement where effectively the Prime Minister wanted to send everybody home, came just a week before that event. And if I'm honest, it really wasn't until that day itself that we really realized, just how much this was going to impact on us.
TTG took on something of a campaigning role, I believe, with your #SaveTravel campaign. What did the campaign try to do, and what do you think it achieved?
Yes, well, as I say, that was a big part of our strategy that we formulated early on, to support the industry, to stand up and campaign for the industry, and also to evolve our own business. But yeah, campaigning was a key part of that. So quite early on, led by our editor, Sophie Griffiths, and our group editor, Pippa Jacks, we set out plans around the Save Travel campaign. And this was really aimed at lobbying for sector-specific support for our travel community. A lot of people don't really understand that the unique pressures that the travel industry has been on over the past 12 months. Unfortunately, I think that extends to the government. So we've still not really seen how much the government understands it. But for travel agents and for travel companies, not only did the pandemic result in them losing business and obviously cancelling business that was booked last year, while the pandemic was going on, it resulted in them effectively having to cancel and refund all the business that they'd done in the months before the crisis started. So it was a really, and it still is, a kind of unique set of pressures on people in the travel industry. And we felt very strongly, as did our community and the senior leaders that we worked with at the start of this campaign, we felt very strongly that the government needed to recognise that and needed to put in place some sector-specific support for travel companies, for companies in aviation, which has been very well documented in national media. And that was what we lobbied for. And really that campaign took shape, not right at the start of the crisis, but more in May, June time, and resulted in us lobbying for all of our community to write a letter to Grant Shapps and Rishi Sunak. And that was delivered in late summer by some of the senior leaders in travel, some of our senior team to Parliament. And, there is, without being overly sort of optimistic around it, there has been a sea change, I think, around the government's attitude towards the travel industry. And without going into too much detail of the minutiae of travel, before Christmas, there was a government global travel task force that was set up to plan the management of travel during the crisis, and that was quickly disbanded. And actually that task force had no members of the travel industry involved. It's been quite encouraging this year. There's been a new task force which has listened to more of the concerns of the industry. And actually, as we speak, they are due to report within the next couple of weeks, and we will see just how much the government has listened to the travel industry. If I can add just something else on campaigning, in actual, I could talk for half an hour about campaigning, but it's probably not a good idea. But one of the things that we did right at the outset, before we even got to Save Travel, and which I think is quite of interest in publishing, is we did something quite unique, I think, in that we reached out to our competitors. We realised back at the beginning of April just how under siege the travel industry was. So we reached out to every one of our travel media competitors to run a joint campaign, whereby we would all agree to promote the positive stories, the stories that our community could learn positive things from. And we would promote each other's positive stories, particularly in social media, but also through some other means, particularly in the magazines. And we would actually promote each other's content in order for the greater good, to show we were standing up for our industry. And almost all the travel trade Media came in on that. There were 8 titles, apart from one. And that was a very positive exercise, I think, that was widely recognised at the time. And that was called One Travel Industry. And still to this day, if you look at that hashtag across social media, you'll still see that hashtag reverberating. And that was about the media just simply showing its support, for an industry under siege.
And in terms of what you want the government to do, are there any key things which you would like them to do which they're not doing at the moment?
Well, a great deal. It's quite a key point, this, around this sector-specific support. I mean, I could go into all the details, but that went into the second petition that we did later last year. But it's simply that recognition that these companies that have not only had their businesses stopped, but have had to refund the consumer as well. And in some ways, they haven't necessarily done that brilliantly. And we know that travel companies have had a pretty bad rap, overall. And in some respects, some of them unfortunately haven't treated their customers as well as they should have done. But it's ensuring, what we need to see is more government support for this specific industry, financial support that will help this industry trade through and get back to doing the stuff it does so well, and without being too cliched about it. We always talk about travel people selling dreams, and as a media business, it's our aim to help them do that.
And as you look back over the past year, I mean, obviously COVID, well, I'm assuming COVID has hit revenues to a certain extent, but to what is there any extent that COVID has actually been good for business? When you come out of it, will you look back on positive aspects which you will continue post-COVID?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of answers to that. One is around mindset, and the other is around the very real changes that we've made to the business that in some respects perhaps have hastened change in a way that may not have happened without the pandemic. In terms of our mindset, I think it's those companies that have performed strongly through this period, will emerge from the COVID crisis enhanced, stronger, and believing more in themselves. And I've become, partly through necessity, I've become a believer in the Stoic philosophy, actually, and the importance for all of us of believing that we will prevail through the crisis, the importance of believing that this crisis is the defining moment for our business and for the way that we do business, and that as a result of that, we will emerge from this crisis stronger. And I think that's a really important way of looking at things, which I believe that my team shares now. We talked a lot about this stuff, and they're also a bit bored of me quoting Winston Churchill in our team updates, just because I spent a long time, reading inspirational biographies during this period as well, to give me and to help give the company the strength to get through. So on the one hand, that mindset piece, we are emerging as a stronger business, and I think a lot of businesses will feel, hey, you get through this, and we'll get through anything. So you look forward with excitement to the next steps. I think the second half of that question is how we have evolved, going back to our strategy around supporting, campaigning, and evolving internally, getting through the pandemic. We really have evolved, and if I think now, even a year ago, where we were as a business going into this, we believed passionately in print publishing as part of our overall mix of the website and many, many events. And we were still publishing TTG, the Travel Trade Gazette, as a weekly magazine. And I was very proud of telling anyone I met that, that we had published the Travel Trade Gazette virtually every week since March 1953. And we did that because there was still a strong market for it. It wasn't some sort of vanity exercise. And whenever we researched it with our market, and the last time we did that was at the beginning of 2019. The market told us they wanted the print magazine, and it was well supported by our advertisers and by our community. So at the beginning of this, we were publishing the weekly magazine, and going through the crisis quite early on, we took that print magazine digital only. So we published it as a weekly digital magazine from March to July. And we stopped printing in paper. We stopped, that whole side, simply to save costs. I wouldn't put any bones about that. It meant we could save a very significant amount of money at a time when our market had collapsed. And as a controlled circulation title, we were able to do that without upsetting our subscribers as a free title. When we got to the summer, as we do every summer actually, because it's such a slow time for the travel market, we took that digital weekly magazine fortnightly, but then made plans to bring the magazine back in print from September as a monthly. And that was a big step for us after what was 67 years of publishing weekly. And we brought effectively the same magazine back as a print monthly in September, and that was reasonably well supported by our market. There have been many ups and downs on the roller coaster over the past year, and that was quite a good time for us to come back. Although then, as we know, the country was quickly in that period hit by the second wave and the ups and downs of the autumn and the winter. But I also took a firm decision then that we weren't just going to go into monthly magazine publishing half-heartedly. It was very clear that during the pandemic and during those opening weeks and months that there wasn't really a place for weekly magazine publishing in our sector anymore, or certainly not for me and for the way that we do business. The pace of change, the pace of news, the pace of information was so much that that weekly magazine had kind of lost some of its validity. So we then, having believed passionately in the weekly, we moved into monthly publishing, and believing that if we were going to publish monthly, we were going to make this the market-leading monthly magazine. And we did some development work. It was an investment, actually, with an external design agency that we've worked with in the past called Oliver and Grames, based down in Brighton, guys that are steeped in the travel industry that know us very well. But we made that external investment, quite a bold investment in the middle of all this, to repackage that monthly title on as a true monthly, a perfect bound magazine, heavy quality paper stock, obviously lots of thought into how editorially a monthly magazine differs from more of a newsy weekly magazine. And we carried out that development work really in October and November, ahead of launching as the perfect bound, very nice looking monthly magazine from the January edition, which we did. So that was quite a transition. And whilst for our market, it continues to have its ups and downs, which people will read in the national media. The magazine has been very consistent now and has been quite consistently well supported since the beginning of 2021. So quite a transition there from weekly to monthly publishing. And without going into too much detail, but quite an important part of that as well was looking at our circulation. As I mentioned, as a controlled circulation title, ABC audited, without any bones on it, our market collapsed and there were plenty of changes within the market. So another investment that we made at the height of the crisis was in our circulation, and was in quite a heavyweights telemarketing campaign that we ran in October and November. So really getting that circulation up to date and fit for the new world for January. So
was that circulation still controlled, free, or paid for?
No, it's still controlled free, and we have made changes in other areas of the business that I'll come on to, and other strategic changes. So that was really the the changes on the print side. I can talk a little bit about events, and I know anyone listening to this podcast will have been through a similar transition last year, particularly in B2B media, I think, around transforming live events to online events or launching new online events. We went through that transition right from the end of March last year. We launched our first half-day seminar. We quickly moved into launching lots and lots of online events, and looking back, I'm amazed at just how significant our output was. I think when I added it up, recently, between March last year and January this year, we did something in the region of between 70 and 80 different online events, large and small.
So were those events typically webinars or conferences or awards? What was the spread?
It was quite a spread, actually. Our strongest performing online events were typically half-day seminars, editorially led, that we ran from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. with live elements, live Q&As, which we thought were really important. And I think that's important for anyone running online events. I think they need that live element to make them current and to make them interactive rather than a kind of passive experience. So there were seminars. We did a number of what we called digital destinations, festivals, working with tourist boards on promoting themselves to our market. They were all very, very keen to keep interest in their destinations alive, ranging from Visit Florida to Tourism Australia and many other tourist boards that we worked with. We also did many face-to-face interviews, face-to-face online, obviously. We ran a regular video diary feature called 1 Week at a Time that we ran with travel agents. Last summer we ran a series of Restart Travel events, which unfortunately didn't really herald the restart of travel, but we gave it our best shot.
Good intentions.
Good intentions. And some quite niche events in luxury travel as well. So in the good times, we run live events called Luxpo, which are all about facilitating one-to-one meetings between luxury agents and luxury travel suppliers. And we took that format very successfully online. We ran a major luxury travel conference curated by our brilliant editor of TTG Luxury magazine, April Hutchinson, in October. So they varied of all shapes and sizes, really.
So I imagine your learning curve has been steep, because I imagine a lot of these things you weren't doing before. But what would you say have been the key learnings? So if you kind of take an event which, let's say, you ran towards the end of the year and compare it with one of your early ones, how would they be different?
So I guess one of our key learnings was to invest in an online platform. We started, like a number of companies, I think, working with Facebook Live, for example, and we'd run a series of Facebook Live events before the pandemic, and moved into the pandemic using Zoom as our platform. But it soon became really apparent that we needed to invest in a bespoke online event platform that offered us real standout from our competitors and from the huge plethora of online events that suddenly came up. So we worked with a US partner that has been really good for us, actually, and actually choosing that partner. What was most important was the customer service that they gave us and the support they gave the business, and that's been a key part of that development in online events over the past few months. You also mentioned there what sort of events work best online, and we in the good times we run 3 sort of major awards ceremonies a year. We do the Top 50 Travel Agencies program, we do the TTG Luxury Travel Awards, and up until 2019 we did the TTG Travel Awards, which we're actually in the process of relaunching right now as a new event. But I would argue that awards are kind of the one live event that works less effectively online. I think awards aren't supposed to be online, really. But having said that, we have just recently, actually, a couple of weeks ago, I'm really proud of what we achieved with one of our awards programs. So we run, as I mentioned, the TTG Top 50 Travel Agencies. We've been running that since 2016. It kind of does what it says on the tin, and that it sets out to scour the country and find the 50 best travel agents in the country. We launched that event last autumn, and went through quite a transition there, actually, because when we launched it, we still thought we had an opportunity to put a live event on this March, but we didn't know, and we were very honest and transparent with our readers and our community, which I think has been important throughout this. And we said, it'll either be live at the Vox Centre in Birmingham or live from the comfort of your own home. And as things unfolded, we don't need to go into the history, but it soon became very apparent that awards ceremony would have to take place online, and it did so on March the 19th. We worked on our bespoke platform, and we did something which I'm really proud of, actually. We again, and I think it's a familiar theme here, we invested a considerable amount of money in this online event. We didn't do it on the cheap. We worked with the same partner that we worked with on our live awards to create quite an original online awards program, which was a mix of pre-filmed presentations that took place in a film studio in Camberwell and were run as live. And then we did something really special on the day. We had some live elements where we zoomed in, so to speak. We zoomed into some of our finalists who joined us during the live presentation. And then we realized before the day, that we had a kind of happy circumstance, and that the UK and Ireland's number one travel agent was actually in Wimbledon, about 20 minutes drive from where I live, and about 10 minutes walk from where our contributing editor, Abby Healy, lives. So we thought, how much fun this would be if we could ensure that their team were watching the live awards ceremony from their agency. How much fun would it be if just when they were announced during the virtual ceremony, we appeared at their door for a bit of video feed. And remarkably, that worked, and that all came off. That all came off really nicely. If anyone looks at my LinkedIn, you'll see a really popular post there that I posted when we turned up to present this live award. So people talk about hybrid events, and that being a big part of the future of events. And in a small way, I think that's what we achieved on March the 19th.
I think that sounds very brave, because I can imagine the potential for disaster was quite high.
Yes, we were lucky that they were there in their agency, watching it on their big screen. We were lucky for all sorts of reasons. For the tech, which was going through my phone as we videoed ourselves at the door, going off to the live ceremony. But the ceremony was kind of being hosted, or the voiceover was Alan Dedicoat, who I'm sure many know is the voice of Strictly. So having that again, that investment in that really professional voiceover that kept the whole thing together. We had one or two live hiccups, but having that really professional element to it really helped us get through the day, and that was definitely one of the standout moments for TTG's lockdown experience.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
Last autumn, it sounds like a busy autumn, by the way, you had. You unveiled TTG Plus, which I believe is a new membership offering. Can you talk us through the thinking behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, in a sense, there's nothing original around the thinking here, and it's part of the publishing trends that so many people will be familiar with. But yeah, we set out some plans a couple of years ago, actually, working with our online partner to transition from what had been an entirely free open access platform, our website, ttgmedia.com, to becoming more of a membership business, first through requiring readers to register for the site before reading, and then transitioning into a paid for membership business. I haven't made any bones about that. Our publishing model was getting outdated, in the 21st century, as a controlled circulation magazine, as an open access website. And, if I'm honest, too much of our revenue was inconsistent. And we needed to create that recurring revenue piece. And I say that, and this was a plan that we put in place ahead of the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic struck and our advertiser revenue collapsed, and it was a time for us to consider, how to bring our membership proposition forward, because it's something that we had been working towards this year in 2021. But it seemed important to bring that in, for the business, but also because what we were doing at the time, and I think has been widely recognised in our industry, is the incredible job that our team has done, across the team to support our industry, absolutely tirelessly, and that widely recognised, brilliant job that we've done. I think it gave us a license just to start talking about our paid for membership, and actually, not to be embarrassed about the fact that what we do and the content, the award-winning content that we produce, does have a value, and that is a challenge in a market where we have a number of free content competitors, and we still do to this day. But we were quite bold with that move and with that plan towards that, which really last June, July, August, we were planning for our September launch of TTG Plus. And it was extremely important to us not to just wake up one day and switch on a paywall and say, hey, there you go, now you've got to pay this. We put a lot of development time into developing all the benefits that came from being a member of TTG Plus. And without spending too long going through it, those benefits, we think they're quite special, and we think they really do support our market, and we really do think that they're a really strong value. So we do things like we created a suppliers directory live, we call it, which is a suppliers directory which is updated virtually every day with key names and contacts that people in our market will need. And of course, there's been a lot of changes of personnel in our market. So we put a lot of work into making that work. We produced something called the Travel Agent Tracker, which we launched last April at the height of the phase one of the crisis, if you like. And that's a fortnightly research piece where we survey our markets and we report on how sales are, how inquiries are, what destinations are of interest, what prices people are achieving. So all our members get access to that report. All our members get access to our online content-led events, and often they include exclusive research or interviews with government ministers, such as Nigel Huddleston, the tourism minister, or Robert Courts, the aviation and maritime minister. And the fourth element of that package is our archive. So this had been a personal project of mine for some time, actually, for years, quite honestly, that right back to when UBM owns TTG, we had these musty old leather-bound volumes that contained every edition of the Travel Trade Gazette going back to March 1953. An absolute treasure trove of information, history of travel, a history of advertising as well, which is often one of the most interesting things in the old volumes. But it just sat there in leather-bound volumes, and it wasn't easy to read them. So I'd had this plan for years to digitize the whole archive. We actually set that in motion pre-pandemic. It was something we were working towards, and then we finished the project during the pandemic. And now that whole archive, says what is now 68 years worth of Travel Trade Gazette content, now sits online. It's fully searchable for our members. So that's another benefit that we introduced for TTG Plus members, and all of that went live last September.
And progress so far? Do you see no regrets, so to speak? You're happy that this is the way forward for the business?
Yeah, I'm very happy this is the way forward. I think it's important that that we maintain that and we grow that. And we've if I'm honest, we've learned a lot along the way, and the iteration now is a couple of steps removed from the iteration that we launched with last September. And we work with some outside advisors on just honing the offer to what we wanted to achieve. But I'm quite pleased with where we are actually now. And one of the changes, I think this is interesting and something I've talked to other publishers about though. But when you introduce this paid for membership, paid for subscriptions, where you draw that line between the free to air content and the paid for content, and at what point what is effectively a paywall kicks in. And we started quite timidly, I think, actually, in that by memory, we allowed readers to read 7 stories a week on our site before they hit the paywall. After we'd worked with some advisors, we moved to a bolder position of only allowing 5 stories a month before being confronted with the wall, and that has certainly sped up conversion. And I think it was it wasn't an easy decision to make that, but it's proving fruitful, definitely. And yeah, where we are now with members, it's growing nicely. We're getting some nice group memberships in, which is the big game changer really. And it's a long-term game, and I think going back to something you said at the beginning, James, I'm an absolutely passionate believer in the power that being an independent publisher gives you, and the freedom of that. And there's quite a few decisions that I've made and that my senior team have made over the past year that would have been difficult decisions going through a corporate business like the one I used to work for many years ago. But as an independent business where it's just me that owns the business, we have a flexibility, a genuine, it's a cliche really, but we're genuinely nimble in how we do business and have made decisions like that, quite bold decisions, which are paying off. And of course, the other thing, just to finish on that line of thought, the other thing about the pandemic is that it kind of encourages you to take risks, doesn't it? I think, life is hard. let's not make any bones about that. It ain't easy, and things are tough, and so you might as well take some risks because things are pretty tough anyway. And so I think in that sense, and for a lot of businesses, it's not just us. We're not special in that sense. It genuinely has hastened change because it's given people the opportunity to maybe make bolder steps and possibly riskier steps than they would have done previously.
Now, for other publishers considering a move toward the membership model, and I know a few are, what would you say if you had to boil it down to 3 key do's, for publishers considering it? What would they be?
But I think the first do, is to talk to your market. Is something that we've got a lot better at over the years. Consult with your market and not just your most passionate supporters or readers of your website or magazines, but try and consult with a broader cross section of people in your community, and understanding what you mean to them and what you can provide for them that maybe they're not getting. And really get that sense of the value that you can provide them. So that whole piece around talking to the market is incredibly important. I think secondly, actually the work that you do internally and looking at your counterparts in other markets is certainly was really interesting for us. And I wouldn't pretend that we hadn't. I would absolutely compliment businesses like Business of Fashion, The Lawyer, a number of other publishing, membership or subscriptions businesses that we had a good look at and that we learned from. So I think that's that's a real necessity to look around at what others are doing. And I guess I come back to that third point around at what point you drop your paywall and where you put this wall in place. It is tough, but after our experience, I would say don't be too timid. A little bit like we did with our magazine, coming back with a monthly magazine. We wanted to be the best monthly magazine in our market. A little bit like our investment in online events. We wanted to ensure if we were taking these events online, we invested in a unique platform and wanted to make our events the best in the business. And actually, if you're going to do this, and you've got to believe in your content and your package and believe that it is the best in the business, and don't be too timid in where you place that paywall. Don't give away too much free content before you get to that paywall. Otherwise, kind of what's the point? But I would add, coming back to this point around independent publishing, it's a long-term game. It's not something that we expect to change the world overnight, and it is a big pivot. Is another cliche, but it's a big pivot for a traditional media business, controlled circulation titles. It's been operating with a similar model for a long time. It's a big switch to paid for content, but it's a really rewarding one. And when you talk about the value of your content, and the way that everyone's mindset across the business changes as a result of being a subscription or membership business, and everybody celebrating when you get that group membership coming in, and that new, really solid, hard, recurring revenue stream that you simply didn't have 12 months ago. That's really rewarding and very galvanizing for the whole team, actually.
Yes, no, I can imagine. Very exciting. Diversity and inclusion have been two of the big themes of the past 12 months, obviously along with the pandemic. Now, I think you might have been slightly ahead of the curve on this because you launched the TTG Diversity Charter back in 2017. Can you talk us through your thinking on diversity, and for other publishers perhaps sitting on the fence on this issue, what's the business case for fully embracing it?
Yeah, 100%. Well, TTG's involvement with diversity goes back a lot further than that. And of course, diversity means different things to different people. And I guess our broader steps into diversity began in 2011, 2012, when we started working with younger people in the industry and promoting career development through the launch of the TTG 30 Under 30 and giving younger people a real platform in travel. And that evolved in 2015, actually, to the launch of TTG LGBT, which was our program of events and content around LGBT people in travel, and around the opportunity to sell more travel to the LGBT community. And that was very much driven by Sophie Griffiths, who's now our editor, who did a brilliant job actually in waking me up to the opportunities around that. So we ran networking events for LGBT people. We ran a series of seminars, annual conferences around the LGBT opportunity. And really that evolved into the wider diversity piece. We began working on the gender side with the organisation Every Woman. They came to us and asked us to help them launch their Every Woman in Travel Awards a few years ago. And that's become something we've been closely associated with, and with other similar organisations as well, actually. And also around the area of ethnicity in travel and representation of different backgrounds across travel. And we came to the conclusion, and this was borne out by research that we did with PwC as well, actually, that travel companies just weren't paying enough attention to diversity, that their senior teams in particular weren't diverse and inclusive enough. And often the best example of this was when you went to senior level conferences in travel. So This would be ABTA conventions or the Institute of Travel and Tourism events. And you'd often find a very kind of homogenous, quite male, quite white, quite senior audience. And anyone in travel that goes to these events would recognize that. So we wanted to put that on the table, which we did in 2017, 2018, with the Diversity Charter and getting companies to sign up to the principles around operating in the most diverse and inclusive way that they could. And then through the launch of the one-day Diversity and Inclusion in Travel conference that we ran at the QE2 Centre in Westminster in 2019. But the underlying theme there was simply that the best businesses are the most diverse businesses, and only those successful, only businesses that truly reflect their customer base can be truly successful. And that was a really key point that we've been promoting hard in travel. And I think it applies to publishing as well. And I imagine a lot of people, listening to this from publishing companies would recognize that publishing and media, are not necessarily it's not necessarily a very diverse and inclusive business sector. And that's a challenge, ensuring that our own teams are as diverse as possible. Our own teams are as reflective of our communities as they can be, and that we actually have a responsibility as media businesses to be promoting a more diverse way of doing business. And I'll just give one example around that. And it's very easy for us to say, well, when we recruit journalists, for example, we only ever see white journalists. We don't see very much variation in the people applying for jobs. Often, they're from nice middle class backgrounds, and they may have been supported through that period of unpaid work experience, which I was fortunate enough to have at the beginning of my career. The best thing that we can do as media businesses is think about how we can recruit differently, and how we can engage people at different levels, and how we can recruit young people maybe from different backgrounds. And of course, if you always recruit in the same way, you're always going to get the same results, and you're always going to see the same sort of people. But just as an example of what we've done at TTG Media, we've reached out to local schools in Southwark, where we're based, and we've got involved in a couple of careers conferences where we've been looking to engage young people in those areas, that would not be considering media or even travel actually as career paths, and trying to get those people from different backgrounds really interested in working in the media. And it's an incredibly rewarding thing to get involved with, and it's quite a difficult thing to get involved with during the pandemic. But that predated the pandemic. We've been involved with a couple of virtual events at schools in the past year, and we intend to carry on that work. There's a couple of people on my team who really feel about that particularly passionately. One is Mary Ann Pickford, our brilliant sub-editor, is really engaged with that topic, and we will be doing a lot more in that space to really broaden the perception of media and travel to more diverse backgrounds going forward.
Well, it sounds like a very exciting and comprehensive approach, and from the sound of things, it makes both business sense and is the right thing to do anyway.
Yeah, it's important to not just put on conferences about this topic, but actually take steps ourselves and do everything that we can in this area. So nothing changes overnight, but I'm really keen to develop this and actually see some of those links with local schools result in some of those people, ultimately joining us as interns, joining the business. That's where, I'd love to be challenged on that. It's all very well for me to be pontificating about this now, but I hope to be able to say to you, James, in a couple of years that actually this has resulted in these people now working for the business.
Excellent. Well, watch this space. So what's in the pipeline for TTG? What do you think the business will look like in a few years' time?
Sure. Well, there's looking back on the evidence of the last 8 years since I took over the business, there is another hell of a roller coaster ride ahead. But I would say a further strengthening of this business. I mean, like I said earlier on, I think it's those businesses which emerge stronger from COVID. Will have a great platform to continue to develop. As we go on, and in many respects, we're closer to our community than we've ever been, and we have a closer understanding of the requirements of our community. In terms of the mix of a modern media business, we've made a fundamental shift there in terms of going from a weekly magazine to a monthly magazine. That's not going to change now. That's where we are. That's who we are, and we still believe passionately in print publishing, sitting in the middle of the business. And actually, being the link that promotes everything else that we do as well. I do expect a storming back to live events. I think there is a big demand for this in travel. And actually, we are taking a very bold step this month in launching our new awards program, the Travel Industry Awards by TTG. Which is launching this month, and we are actively planning our awards ceremony at Magazine London, so a new warehouse type event space on September the 30th this year. And we expect that period to be a very busy period for live events. So we'll continue to develop in that space. And of course, we'll continue to develop the membership business that I spoke about earlier. All the while maintaining an area of free content, which does include the magazine, actually, which remains free to our qualifying readers. But also, there's one other area that we haven't really touched on in this interview, but it's our business purpose. And TTG exists very clearly to promote a smarter, better, fairer travel industry, and that's a position that we set out a couple of years ago when we redesigned the business. And that mindset where we won't do anything unless it helps us promote a smarter, better, fairer travel industry has already led us to some strong developments over the past couple of years, and I expect that to take us into new areas as well as we move ahead.
So I must ask, there's a strapline which you've had for a few years, I know, and a lot of thought went into it. What was the reason for that strapline?
Well, it's quite simple, really. I mentioned earlier some research that we did at the beginning of 2019. So we spoke to over 1,000 people in our market about whether we were still relevant for them, what sort of job we could do for them. We also did a lot of work internally, and that external voice fed into our internal work, which led to us finding our business purpose. And we started with why. I'm sure many people are familiar with a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. And it sets out how it's those businesses that have a clear purpose, a higher purpose, if you like, rather than simply selling magazines or selling events, but are trying to do something more of an infinite goal that they're working towards. How it's those businesses that history shows us that truly succeed. And that helped us arrive at this position for smarter, better, fairer travel. So TTG exists to promote a smarter industry. So an industry in which we can help people, give people the tools and all the information that they need to do the very best job that we can. We promote a better industry, one in which we help the industry and everyone within it raise their standards and strive for higher goals. And we promote a fairer travel industry, one in which people are fairer both to each other and to the environment and to the customer. And all of those principles underpin everything that we do. And I would say having such a clear purpose, it very much helps us as a team know what we're doing and what we're working towards. It's actually been pretty helpful for recruitment as well, and it's a nice position, very clear position that it makes me very happy when we interview people and people recognise that and people are attracted by that. And I'd go so far as to say, it's an essential for a business to have a clear purpose like that if you want to attract the best and brightest young people in media for the future.
If you look at the direction of travel for the B2B sector as a whole, I think we've probably touched on some of the key trends. And what would you say are the the most significant trends affecting the whole business-to-business publishing sector?
Yeah, there's the kind of obvious things like the move away from print. I would say, and I would say this as an independent publisher with smaller overheads and less financial pressures, but I think some businesses have been too hasty to ditch their print titles and go online only. I think print does give you a real tangible reference point with your community, with your audience, that when you're a website and you're one click away from oblivion, if that's all you have, I think that's a challenge, and so there is that trend away from print, but I would passionately advocate for businesses to think about very, very carefully before doing away with print, even if it's not delivering that much of a contribution to your business. Overall, again, as you mentioned, we touched on the move towards membership and paid for subscriptions. I think what's happened in the past year, not just in our sector, but in every sector, there's that saying, when the tide goes out, it's clear who's been swimming naked, and who
It's a lovely image.
Sorry to leave you with that one, but yeah, it's during the difficult times that really force us all to to examine ourselves and see what we actually have got. And I think I talk quite a bit there about the benefits that we offer to our paid for members of TTG Plus. The most important thing that we offer to our members of TTG Plus is our content. Is our award-winning content, our up-to-the-minute analysis, and which really, other than one or two close competitors, is unrivaled in our business sector in the UK and Ireland. And I'm sure that's true for many other B2B communities. Before you can talk about the value of the consumer market, and I think B2B publishers really need to put a value on that. And maybe collectively. We can't operate collectively, but wake up to the fact that there is a huge value to what we do, and none of us should be underselling ourselves, particularly at a time of huge change right
now. And finally, Daniel, outside of work, a question we ask all our podcast guests: how do you relax?
Yeah, I was asked this recently by someone else actually. So we actually ran one of many things we've done over the past year that I haven't touched on actually is a campaign we launched called Get Travel Talking, whereby we urge everyone in the industry to take a pledge to do positive actions for their mental health, to ensure that they're taking time out. This was led by Tom Parry, one of our reporters, done an amazing job on this and engaging the industry in this area of mental health and getting everyone to take it seriously. So we encourage people in our industry to do that, and we made a pledge as a team as well to make a pledge for our mental health. And the thing that I pledged to do to really create that space for myself was to learn to play the violin. And I'd never learned an instrument in my whole life. And I turned 50 last December, and I've got a series of goals for my 50s, and one of which is to master a musical instrument. So I am learning to play the violin, and that has given me a bit of space, although it does wake my baby daughter up sometimes, which is another cause for concern. But yeah, that leads me to the second thing. It's my family. I've got 3 amazing kids. My son Sam's at university in Bristol. My daughter Alessia is 18 and doing her A-levels, or however they're doing the A-levels this year. And I have my little daughter Scarlett, who is just 10 months old. As
wow,
well.
There's back to nappy changing after an 18-year gap.
Yeah, exactly.
And sleepless nights, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're a fabulous distraction, and a lot of my energy goes there. And I think having a family, really does feed into your working life as well, because ultimately, you don't just want to do the very best job you can for your work family, but you want to make your kids proud of you, and my wife proud of me as well. So that is another focus for me too.
Daniel Pearce, thank you very much for being our guest on the In Publishing podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity, James. Thanks. It's been great.
We would like to thank Advantage CS again for sponsoring this podcast. Advantage CS has been developing subscription management solutions for the information industry since 1979. The comprehensive functionality, adaptability, and scalability of its software helps leading publishers around the world manage their businesses more effectively. Find out more at advantagecs.com. Many thanks to Daniel for giving us an in-depth look at how TTG has tackled the challenges of the past 12 months and their plans for the future. His emphasis on quality and doing things to the best of their ability shines through. If you want to know more about TTG Media, then check out their website at ttgmedia.com. Although be prepared to register because I think they've brought that paywall forward since we did the interview. Good for them. You can also follow Daniel on Twitter, where his handle is @Daniel Pearce. If you want to know more about us, then our website is inpublishing.co.uk and our email address is editorial@inpublishing.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and do join me in 2 weeks' time for another In Publishing podcast. Bye for now.